You say today is a great day. Many people say today is an awful day. What don't they understand?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question and for having me on. It really is a great day for consumers, for innovation, and for freedom. There's a lot of apocryphal rhetoric out there. Here's the reality. We're voting to go back to the 2015 regulatory framework, the Title I framework, that the Commission had in place, again, in 2015 and for the 20 years before that. This is not moving towards some Mad Max version of the Internet where ISPs are going to have complete free reign to dictate your online experience. The 2015 framework had strong legal protections for consumers. Consumers are going to continue to benefit from that without the harms we're seeing from Title II.
That said, a number of organizations say they intend to sue the FCC. An activist group called Free Press saying they'll sue on the basis of broken process, deeply flawed legal reasoning, willful rejection of evidence, and absolute disregard for public input. The Attorney Generals of Washington and New York also saying they intend to sue. Attorney General Eric Schneiderman saying this is not just an attack on the future of our Internet. It is an attack on all New Yorkers and on the integrity of every American's voice in government. And we will fight back. What's your reaction to those kinds of comments?
Yeah, anytime the FCC takes an action in the space of Internet regulation, companies, big and small, either way, sue over the decisions we make. But here's the reality. The Supreme Court in 2005 took up the FCC's authority to classify broadband Internet access service as a Title I information service, and it found that the FCC did have the authority. And that's the only classification the Supreme Court has ever blessed. So the FCC's decision here, both as a procedural matter and as a substantive legal matter, is on extremely sound legal footing. So I'm confident in where we go from here.
We also spoke with former FCC Chair Tom Wheeler, who oversaw net neutrality protections. Take a listen to what he told us.
For the first time since 1934, with this decision, the FCC is washing its hands, walking away from that congressionally mandated responsibility. And they're only doing it for the, most important network that will define the rest of the 21st century. It's an inconceivable kind of action.
What do you make of this accusation that the FCC is absolving itself of responsibility rather than taking responsibility?
That's simply not the case. Again, we're going back to the same regulatory framework that was in place in 2015. I think your listeners and viewers can remember the Internet of 2015. It was not a free-for-all. There were protections. Those protections are going to be back in place. Again, the Federal Trade Commission is going to be fully empowered for the first time in 2 years to police ISPs' conduct with respect to consumers. The FCC's 2015 decision stripped the Federal Trade Commission of 100% of its authority to protect consumers against ISPs. Another key piece of that is online privacy protections, which consumers care deeply about. The FTC is the nation's premier consumer protection agency. Again, they've been prohibited during the last 2 years from taking action because of the FCC's Title II decision. So consumers are gaining protections as a result of this decision. Again, this is not going to be a situation where there are no rules in place.
Now, Comcast has said they won't invoke paid prioritization, but let's say they do. What would happen in that case?
Well, I think part of what happens here is there's a misperception about what Title II did. Right now, Title II is not stopping providers from blocking websites, creating fast and slow lanes, the paid prioritization you talked about. There are reasons why that stuff is not taking place today. It's market forces that are regulating that conduct. And after our decision, those forces stay in place. And I know there's a lot of people that don't believe in market forces, and that's fine. There's actual positive law we're putting in place, too. There's federal antitrust law, which prevents ISPs from entering agreements that unfairly, anti-competitively block, throttle, or would create anti-competitive paid prioritization. So there's going to be rules and legal standards out there that are going to be able to police any of this conduct that people are talking about.
What about the fake comments in the public comment section? Doesn't that give you any pause that 1 million comments were written potentially by a robot, to counter the vast majority of comments that were against this repeal?
No, it doesn't give me pause. Here's why. We have run an open and transparent process. The Administrative Procedure Act is very clear about how, as an agency like us, we run our rulemakings and run our record. We have an open record. Anybody that wants to file a comment can file a comment. We don't require identification on the front end because that would discourage the robust participation in our docket. We got over 24 million filings in our proceeding. I think that shows the passion that people have in this issue, and our decision is based on the substantial record evidence that we developed.
Right, but the vast majority of those comments were against this repeal.
There was a wide range of views that were expressed, and again, the question that we have to confront is a threshold legal matter for the FCC. Did Congress, when they set up Title I of the Communications Act and Title II of the Communications Act, did they intend the internet to be in one or the other? And when you look at that legal determination that we have to make as commissioners at the agency, it's clear to me that this is a Title I information service.
So when will we see lawmakers actually enact this into law?
So our decision today goes into effect as soon as the OMB, another government agency, reviews the transparency rule that we adopted, and then it will take effect shortly after that. And so that's the timeline that we're looking at.
And how do you see the internet, let's say the internet 5 years from now, being different? You know, already it seems like so much power is consolidated in the hands of a few very powerful companies. Many of those companies were against this repeal. But how does the internet look different to you, let's say, in 5 years?
It's a good question. Again, that's why this is such a great decision. Title II is a monopoly-style regulation, a heavy-handed regime. A lot of the debate has been about AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, or the big ISPs. You know, I think they've been negatively impacted. I think that's what our record shows. But they also have an army of regulatory lawyers that can wade through the Title II requirements. When I talk to consumers, what they want is more competition, and that's where Title II heads us in the wrong direction. There's thousands of smaller ISPs out there that are either trying to provide service to consumers for the first time or provide competition to some of those larger providers. Those are the ones that have been hurt worst by this decision. So I look forward, when we repeal this Title II rule, those providers are going to have an easier time competing, getting money, and consumers are going to benefit as a result of that increased competition from repealing Title II.